My entire remaining estate. I leave to Elias Thorne. The lawyer's words dropped into the suffocating silence of the room like stones into a deep well. Elias Thorne. Me. It couldn't be right. My breath hitched. Across the polished mahogany desk, Crystal Sterling, Mr. Arthur Sterling's young widow, went rigid. Her veil couldn't hide the way her eyes, moments before anticipating a windfall, widened in stunned disbelief, then instantly narrowed into slits of pure venom. The mask of elegant grief shattered. This wasn't the jackpot she'd meticulously schemed for. This was impossible. Her perfectly glossed lips parted, a strangled gasp escaping before she found her voice, sharp and shaking with fury. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice dangerously low. Her knuckles were white on the armrests of the plush leather chair. She looked like a predator whose prey had just vanished into thin air. And her gaze, it sliced right through me. Me, the loyal servant she barely acknowledged. Me, the man who now, apparently, held everything she thought was hers. The air crackled, thick with shock and her boiling rage. Before Crystal, before the will reading, before the world turned upside down, my life was built on routine and quiet loyalty. For 20 years, I was Elias Thorne, Mr. Arthur Sterling's personal assistant. But it was always more than a job title. I was his right-hand man, the keeper of his schedule, the buffer against the world, the one who knew he preferred Earl Grey tea strong with no sugar, and the Financial Times before the local paper. In his later years, as his steps slowed, I became his caregiver too, a confidant in the quiet evenings. I came from humble beginnings, finding not just employment but a sense of belonging with Mr. Sterling. He wasn't just wealthy, he carried his fortune with an old-world grace. A self-made man, sharp and shrewd, but fundamentally decent. His mansion, vast and filled with the weight of history, never felt cold under his watch. It was orderly, peaceful. Our days followed a familiar pattern: morning briefings, managing the complexities of his affairs and household, accompanying him to appointments, sometimes just sharing the comfortable silence of his library, surrounded by the scent of old books and wood polish. He valued loyalty fiercely. "Elias, trustworthiness is a currency far more valuable than anything minted," he often told me. He treated me not as staff, but with genuine respect, a kindness that extended far beyond my salary. He'd helped me personally more than once, discreetly, preserving my dignity. The bond we shared was unspoken, yet profoundly deep. My life wasn't exciting, but it was secure, meaningful. I felt valued. I imagined it continuing that way, seeing Mr. Sterling through his twilight years with quiet dedication. I never foresaw the gilded hurricane that was Crystal. She arrived like a sudden storm, all dazzling smiles, runway-ready outfits, and the faint, cloying scent of expensive perfume mixed with raw ambition. Crystal. Young, beautiful, mid-20s maybe, with eyes that seemed to constantly scan her surroundings, assessing the value of everything and everyone. Mr. Sterling met her at some high society charity function. Initially, she overflowed with charm. She hung on his every word, her laughter bright, her hand resting lightly, possessively on his arm. She called him Arthur with an intimacy that felt slightly rehearsed. Mr. Sterling, perhaps lonely after years as a widower, was utterly captivated. I saw the change in him, the spark in his eyes when she entered the room, the almost boyish eagerness to please her. He, normally so astute, seemed blind to anything but her youth and flattering attention. I tried to feel happy for him. I truly did. But a persistent unease coiled in my gut. Her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a sharpness beneath the surface, a calculation in her gaze when she studied the Fabergé on the mantelpiece or asked seemingly innocent questions about his portfolio. I remember trying to voice a gentle caution once. "Sir, she seems very interested in the business side of things," I murmured. He simply waved it away with a chuckle. "Oh, Elias, she's just bright and curious. It's refreshing, don't you think?" The whirlwind romance escalated. Extravagant dates, jewelry that cost more than my annual salary, whispers turning into plans. Then, barely 3 months after they met, the engagement. Followed swiftly by the wedding. A small, hushed ceremony. It felt fundamentally wrong. Too quick. Too strategic. Watching them exchange vows, her beaming up at him with practiced adoration, I couldn't shake a dreadful premonition. Mr. Sterling wasn't just getting a wife. He was welcoming a predator into the heart of his life. The knot of anxiety tightened. Trouble was brewing. After the wedding, Crystal settled into the mansion, and the changes began, like insidious creepers winding through the old house. At first, it was small erosions of the familiar. Mr. Sterling's favorite hearty meals were replaced by her preferred fusion cuisine. Long-standing staff members found their routines arbitrarily changed, causing friction and muttered complaints. Rooms were rapidly redecorated in her cold, minimalist style, cherished antiques banished to storage, replaced by pieces that screamed expense but offered no comfort. Mr. Sterling, besotted and wanting peace, mostly acquiesced. Trying to keep the young wife happy, Elias? He'd say, though his smile sometimes looked forced. Her focus then shifted, subtly but unmistakably, towards me. It wasn't open warfare, not yet. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Little passive-aggressive remarks. Elias, darling, don't you think Arthur's study is terribly gloomy? Maybe something more modern? This, knowing it was his sacrosanct space. Or, are you quite sure you passed on that message, Elias? Arthur seemed completely unaware of the appointment. These comments were dropped casually, often in Mr. Sterling's hearing, designed to subtly erode his trust in my competence. She began requesting access to things that were solely my domain, household accounts, investment summaries, framing it as wanting to help Arthur stay on top of things. Simultaneously, she started isolating him. Visits from his old friends dwindled. Calls went unreturned. His weekly chess partner was told Arthur was too tired. Instead, his diary filled with her social engagements, loud parties, gallery openings crowded with her young, ambitious friends, events where Mr. Sterling often looked visibly drained and out of his element. I saw the mask slip occasionally. A flash of sharp impatience when he fumbled for a word. A dismissive, cutting remark to a maid who'd accidentally spilled water. Once, filtering through the French doors leading to the terrace, I heard her on her phone, her voice dripping with contempt. Honestly, Claire, it's exhausting playing nursemaid to Methuselah, but the inheritance will make it all worthwhile, won't it? She snapped the phone shut the moment she noticed me, her expression instantly smoothing into a saccharine smile. But the words hung in the air, cold and venomous. Mr. Sterling began to fade. He seemed quieter, sometimes confused by the changes swirling around him. He'd ask me about a large charge on a credit card bill, always Crystal shopping, or seem puzzled by a canceled meeting he'd been looking forward to. But whenever I gently tried to raise concerns, he'd retreat, blaming his age or defending Crystal. She breathes life into this old place, Elias, he'd insist, but his eyes held a shadow of doubt I hadn't seen before. I felt a desperate need to protect him, coupled with a crippling sense of helplessness. Accusing the boss's new wife? It was unthinkable. Yet the feeling persisted, growing stronger each day. This wasn't just about a gold digger, it felt like something darker was unfolding. The situation deteriorated markedly after their first year together. Crystal shed any pretense of subtlety. Her demands became bolder, more frequent. Arthur, darling, that Riviera property looks divine, perhaps a little anniversary present? Or shouldn't we simplify your finances, Arthur? Put everything into joint accounts? It would be so much easier for me to help you manage. Her touch became more proprietary, her smile fixed, her eyes like chips of ice. Her campaign against me intensified. Important papers vanished from Mr. Sterling's desk, only to reappear days later after frantic searching, with Crystal offering a breezy apology about tidying. She started screening his calls more aggressively, deciding who he should speak to. She twice manufactured evidence of my supposed incompetence, a missed payment on a utility bill she'd hidden, an imagined scheduling conflict, presenting these lapses to Mr. Sterling with feigned concern. Elias seems so stressed lately, Arthur, she'd murmur. Perhaps he needs a long holiday, or maybe it's time for a change. The very air in the mansion felt charged, heavy with unspoken resentments. The other staff, loyal veterans of Mr. Sterling's household, communicated their worries to me in hushed tones and anxious glances. They spoke of Crystal's increasingly short temper, her lavish spending sprees while complaining about household budgets, the sharp, dismissive way she addressed Mr. Sterling when she thought they were alone. Maria, the head housekeeper, came to me close to tears after Crystal had unleashed a torrent of abuse over a perceived slight, threatening her job, only to morph back into the charming wife the second Mr. Sterling appeared. Mr. Sterling himself looked increasingly frail. The light in his eyes dimmed. He lost weight, moved slower, and sometimes seemed to drift in his own home. Crystal managed his life with suffocating efficiency, doling out his medications, fielding his calls, curating his interactions. She had effectively imprisoned him within his own luxurious life. She dismissed my worried inquiries about his health with patronizing reassurances. He's simply aging, Elias. It's natural. I'm taking excellent care of him. But her care felt like control, tightening its grip day by day. I couldn't just stand by and watch this gentle man be consumed. My loyalty, my deep affection for him demanded action. But I was walking a razor's edge. I needed proof, something undeniable that would force Mr. Sterling to see past his lingering affection or denial. Suspicions weren't enough. And so I began to watch, to listen, to document. Every condescending remark, every extravagant purchase that appeared on the statements I still managed, every instance where she contradicted Mr. Sterling or subtly undermined his authority. I made discreet copies of invoices she carelessly discarded. I kept a meticulous private log, dates, times, overheard snippets of phone calls conducted in hushed, urgent tones. It felt deeply uncomfortable, violating the trust Mr. Sterling had placed in me for 2 decades. But the alternative, letting Crystal continue her insidious takeover, felt far worse. I was an unwilling spy in the place I considered home, desperately searching for a crack in her armor before she did irreparable damage. The tension was a constant, sickening knot in my stomach. The moment of truth arrived disguised as simple carelessness. Crystal, usually surgically attached to her phone and tablet, accidentally left her secondary tablet charging in the library one evening. She'd swept out to attend some glittering gala, an event Mr. Sterling, citing fatigue, had declined. An instinct, a desperate hope, made me pick it up. My hands felt clammy. It wasn't password protected. Heart pounding, I navigated to her messages. And there it was. Cold hard proof. Not just hints, but pages of explicit conversations, mostly with someone named Claire. Texts mocking Mr. Sterling's age, his failing health. Complaints about the charade of being a loving wife. And then the chilling details, discussions about his will. Strategies for ensuring she was the sole beneficiary. Impatience for him to die. First thing I do when the old fool finally croaks? She'd written. Fire that creepy servant Elias and sell this dusty mausoleum. Another exchange detailed how she deliberately misrepresented his occasional forgetfulness to his doctor, trying to build a case for his incompetence, potentially to gain control of his affairs sooner. Bile rose in my throat. It was colder, more calculated, more venomous than even my worst fears. My hands shook, not with fear this time, but with a white-hot rage on behalf of the kind man she was exploiting so callously. I quickly took photos of the most damning messages with my own phone, my mind racing. My first impulse was pure fury, to confront her the moment she returned, to throw the evidence in her perfectly made-up face, to watch her crumble. But then I thought of Mr. Sterling. A messy, public confrontation would devastate and humiliate him. He might even, out of pride or confusion, defend her. No. This poison was hers, but the antidote, the truth, belonged to him. He had the right to know and the right to decide the next step. The following afternoon, I waited until Crystal's sleek sports car purred down the driveway, off on another shopping expedition. I found Mr. Sterling in his study, gazing listlessly out at the rose garden. He looked tired, diminished. I knocked softly on the open door. Mr. Sterling? May I have a private word? It's rather urgent. He turned slowly, his eyes weary but still holding their familiar kindness. Of course, Elias. Come in. Sit down. What is it? Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I stood before his desk. Sir, I know this is highly irregular, and believe me, I wouldn't intrude if it weren't vital. But I've discovered something concerning Mrs. Sterling's intentions. Something I believe you must see. I spoke quietly, respectfully, explaining what I'd found, then carefully showed him the photos on my phone. Silence descended as he read. I watched the emotions flicker across his aged face. Initial disbelief, then confusion, morphing into a deep, profound sadness that seemed to age him further right before my eyes. He sagged back in his leather chair, his complexion paling. He didn't speak for what felt like an eternity, just stared at the screen, his breathing uneven. Finally he looked up, his gaze meeting mine. His eyes were clear now, but filled with a pain that mirrored my own anger. You were right all along, Elias, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I suppose I chose not to see. There was no anger towards me, only a quiet, simmering resentment directed squarely at Crystal's treachery. Thank you, he said, his voice gaining a surprising firmness. Thank you for your loyalty. It seems it's rarer and more valuable than I ever knew. He didn't want a confrontation. He didn't want the ugliness, the recriminations. Instead, with a quiet resolve that was pure Arthur Sterling, he made his decision. The very next day, Mr. Davies, the family lawyer, was summoned. I was asked to wait outside the study during their lengthy meeting. When Mr. Davies finally departed, carrying his briefcase, Mr. Sterling looked at me, a new, steely determination in his eyes. Necessary changes have been made, Elias, was all he said. We will not speak of her actions again. Let her continue her performance. Let her believe she has succeeded. For now. The true twist wasn't just discovering her scheme. It was Mr. Sterling's quiet, calculated response. He knew everything. And Crystal remained blissfully, fatally ignorant. 6 months later, Mr. Sterling passed away in his sleep. Officially, his heart gave out. Unofficially, I knew the weight of Crystal's betrayal, the constant stress she inflicted, had broken more than just his spirit. She orchestrated the funeral with flawless, chilling precision. The grieving widow incarnate, draped in couture black, a single, artful tear escaping occasionally, accepting condolences with practiced melancholy. She clung desperately to the narrative of the adoring young wife who had illuminated his final year. I stood by, fulfilling my duties, my face a mask of professional calm, the secret of the amended will a heavy weight in my chest. The inevitable day arrived. The reading of the will in Mr. Davies's imposing, book-lined office. The attendees were few. A couple of distant cousins Mr. Sterling had kept in touch with, Mr. Davies, Crystal, and myself. The air felt static, charged with anticipation. Crystal naturally took the center seat. Composed, radiating a confidence bordering on arrogance, she clearly envisioned this as the final scene of her triumphant play. Any moment now, she would be discussing asset liquidation, planning exotic holidays, mentally redecorating the mansion, her mansion. Mr. Davies began, his voice methodical. He dispensed with the minor bequests first, the painting to the nephew, the vintage cuff links to the cousin, the significant donation to the city library. With each name that wasn't hers, Crystal sat a little straighter, her faint smile becoming brittle. Just clearing the stage, she likely thought, for the main act. Then Mr. Davies paused. He adjusted his spectacles, his gaze sweeping the room before landing, just for a fraction of a second, on me. And finally he said, the words echoing the ones that had first stunned me, regarding the bulk of my estate, encompassing all properties, financial holdings, shares, bonds, and personal effects not otherwise specified. He cleared his throat. To my loyal companion, steadfast friend, and the man who showed me the meaning of true dedication during these past 20 years, my entire remaining estate, I leave to Elias Thorne. Silence. Utter, disbelieving silence. Then Crystal exploded. What? The word ripped through the quiet room, raw and incredulous. She surged to her feet, shoving her chair back violently. Her face, moments ago serene, contorted into a mask of pure, uncontrolled rage. That's impossible, she shrieked, her voice cracking. It's a mistake. Arthur loved me. He wouldn't do this. Her wild eyes, blazing with accusation, fixed on me. She spat. You twisted him. You manipulated him. Lied about me. This is fraud. I'll see you in court. She lunged towards Mr. Davies, reaching for the will clutched in his hand. Let me see that document. It's a forgery. I'll contest everything. The cousins shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. Mr. Davies, unflappable, held up a restraining hand. Mrs. Sterling, please compose yourself, he stated firmly. The will is perfectly executed, signed, witnessed, and legally sound. Furthermore, he calmly reached into an adjacent folder and produced another document, along with a small handheld digital recorder. Mr. Sterling anticipated this reaction. He left a signed affidavit detailing his reasoning. And he also left this. He pressed the play button. Mr. Sterling's voice, thin but resolute, filled the tense office. It was recorded shortly after he'd made the changes. He spoke of his initial enchantment with Crystal, his growing unease, and finally, his crushing disappointment upon learning the truth of her motives. He named her deceit, her avarice, her lack of genuine affection. He then spoke of me, of 2 decades of quiet service, unwavering loyalty, and his desire to entrust his life's work to someone who valued integrity over inheritance. He explicitly mentioned the evidence I had presented, validating my difficult decision to bring it to him. As the recording clicked off, Crystal stood frozen, speechless. Her face cycled through shock, pallor, and then a deep, blotchy crimson flush of humiliation. The affidavit, which Mr. Davies briefly outlined, reinforced every point, leaving absolutely no doubt about Mr. Sterling's clear mind and deliberate intentions when he signed the new will. Her entire facade, loving wife, devoted caregiver, rightful heiress, disintegrated under the weight of his final words. There was nowhere to hide. The cousin stared aghast. She opened her mouth, perhaps to unleash another torrent, but no sound emerged. With a choked sound, a sob of pure, thwarted rage, she snatched her ridiculously expensive handbag, spun on her heel, and fled the office, slamming the heavy oak door behind her with such force that a framed print on the wall tilted sideways. The revenge wasn't just about the lost fortune. It was the public detonation of her lies, delivered posthumously by the very man she thought she had so cleverly deceived. Life after the will reading felt like waking from a long, tense dream. Crystal, predictably, made legal threats. Lawyers exchanged letters. Accusations of undue influence and diminished capacity were thrown around. But Mr. Davies calmly presented the undeniable evidence. The meticulously documented will, the signed affidavit, Mr. Sterling's recorded statement, and the veiled threat of revealing the text messages I still possessed. Faced with a legally impenetrable wall and the potential for even greater public humiliation, Crystal's lawyers advised her to withdraw. She vanished from the circles she'd worked so hard to infiltrate, presumably to plot her next venture, stripped bare of the sterling millions she'd considered a sure thing. For me, the transition was profound and slightly terrifying. Elias Thorne, the man who had dedicated his life to serving Mr. Sterling, was now the steward of his entire legacy. The sheer scale of it was difficult to comprehend. The mansion, the investments, the responsibilities, it felt like an honor too heavy to bear. Walking through the familiar rooms, now mine, felt surreal. But alongside the shock was a deep, abiding gratitude for Mr. Sterling's final, immense gesture of trust. I kept the household staff, reassuring them immediately that their loyalty was valued and their jobs secure. I spent weeks simply adjusting, processing, remembering Mr. Sterling not just as an employer, but as the closest thing to family I'd known for 20 years. I realized the truest way to honor him wasn't just to hoard the wealth, but to perpetuate his values. I worked with advisors to establish the Arthur Sterling Foundation, dedicated to supporting the arts in our community and, more personally, combating loneliness among the elderly, a cause close to his heart and now mine. Overseeing the foundation, ensuring his name was associated with genuine kindness and support, gave me a new direction, a purpose beyond just managing assets. Life is quieter now, the oppressive tension Crystal generated finally gone. Sometimes in the quiet of the evening, sitting in Mr. Sterling's study, I look out at the darkening gardens and reflect on the storm that passed through our lives. Crystal's blinding greed led her to underestimate the quiet strength of loyalty and the clear-sightedness of the man she tried to manipulate. I never wished for revenge, but I witnessed karma, guided by Mr. Sterling's hand, deliver a resolution that felt undeniably just. The fortune was staggering, but the true inheritance, the one I cherish most, was his final, unwavering affirmation of trust. And that's a legacy worth more than any amount of money.